Hello friends, welcome to Squared Plans. I'm Stephanie and today we're going to be setting up our horizontal planners for the next week in September. And I've got this washi tape here ready to go, as well as these brush pens and water brush pen that I may use. This leaf punch that I just got at Michael's. This label paper. And these sticker books, which I'll pull from. So this is the 4th week of the Plannable Challenge, and this week's theme is Seasons Change. So if you'd like to participate, go ahead and post your spreads up on Instagram using the hashtag PlannableSeptember2021. We'd love to see what you come up with. Okay, you guys, so like I said, I have this sheet of white label paper and I did some watercoloring last night so that it would have time to dry, and am putting in just a mix of these different water-based brush pens that I had in my stash to create a gradient of fall tones from like summer to fall deep color. I have added a little bit of extra on top of it, as I just showed you in an example, just so you guys could see how I did it. That was what I did originally, and I also kind of blended the colors a little bit more last night. And then what I did was actually just stamped on a few more options there. So it is still a little bit wet in areas, just so you know, which will come into play in a minute. But I just wanted to have a little bit of extra watercolor feel to it. So I did wet on dry, and that kind of helped. Here I hit a spot where it was actually a little bit wet still, so I started to seek out the areas that I did not repunch over this morning on, and am looking for those areas. Then I'll punch those out and try to dry the areas that I put in this morning as more of an overlay. So the idea here is to punch out leaves in these various colors, kind of going from the warms to that cooler leaf green, and work for a gradient of tone across the spread. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm still very new to watercoloring in general, so my technique is just like trial and error at this point. I will say that I used my Arteza Real brush pens for this because I had a good supply of color. However, the saturation of the ink was pretty light, as you can see. Even though I had to add water to try to create that muddled look, but the color was still a lot more pastel than I was hoping it would be in the end. I was a little bit disappointed with the brush pens for that. The bristles of the brush pens are also really not that good, so when I first got the pens I was excited because I thought they were going to be the quality that you would use for like brush lettering, but they're really not. Just an FYI, if you watch this video and you see that link, those pens I would say are much more suited for coloring and not so much for anything with the precision, and they're also, like I said, somewhat desaturated in tone. But I did end up using those anyway, and I have pulled some washi in similar, more pastel oriented tones to kind of complement that, so we'll see how that goes. I decided to punch those leaves, like I said, on label paper so that I could easily just stick down the leaves when I was done. I wouldn't have to like glue each one down individually. Just made it easier for me, but if you don't have access to label paper of any sort, paper would do the same thing. If you have some kind of leaf punch, just do that, and then a little bit of glue runner or a little bit of glue stick, and you could stick them down pretty easily, I would say, to your spread. So I'm just getting started with the composition here of how the leaves I think are going to lay down on the sheet. And it does take me a little bit to get this going. I'm trying to work the colors in order so that I get that gradient of tone with the darker greens down to the like almost yellows in the middle, and then oranges, and then red, which is actually more pink when you look at it with this pastel palette, but I was going for red, and red kind of ended up being more pink and more muted. But yeah, so that's how you're going to see me compose this. And I didn't want to do a straight diagonal. I wanted to have a little bit more fluidity to how it looked, a little bit more like leaves on the breeze. So I'm going to do a little bit more curvature with how I'm laying the leaves in. Also giving some space in between some leaves and then grouping some in others so it looks a little more organic. I'm also thinking that I'll kind of have a cluster of leaves like piled up here in the right lower corner with the red tones, so that kind of just looks like a pile of leaves grouped together there in the corner, and a little bit more of like it's blowing in the wind and collecting down in the bottom. So there's a few things that I really like about this idea. One, if you want to do any color scheme that your heart desires, you have that freedom. Whatever marker colors or watercolors you have at your disposal, you can create that color scheme and make it work. That's one of the awesome things about this. The second thing is that you don't have to do watercolor per se. You could just color, swatches of color and punch them out with any kind of marker, crayon, whatever you want to do, and use that as your sticker, or or your decor. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility that I really like. I like using stickers and I like creating pretty planner items, but sometimes it's just fun to get your hands dirty and get creative and not just use something that somebody already created themselves, but really, exercise your abilities to try things and get artistic and just, like, it's just good for the soul. So I've pulled out my Rainbow Mega Sticker book and have pulled out a few circle stickers for focus boxes that I'll try to incorporate here. I thought I was going to have a little bit easier time finding matching colors, but I did find 3 that I think work well with the more pastel tones that these leaves kind of tended towards. So I brought those in. And now I'm in the first fall sticker book from the Happy Planner, and I pulled it because I saw these letters that I thought I could make a little cute quote here at the bottom. But as I was laying it in, I kind of realized that I don't have all the options that I would want. I really wanted it to be like Happy Fall, but in the gradient of tones going from green to red, so that I can make a nice smooth transition. But because you're limited on what colors have, or what letters have what colors, I put it down there, but I'm not in love with it at this point. So it's there for now, and we'll see if it stays. And I want a few more leaves here for the spread. So what I did is I trimmed off some of the excess of the label paper, and I'm doing another row of leaves. It's kind of punching where it works. They are catching at some points where there's a lot of sharp edges catching in as I stick it into the punch. So I'm kind of working around that, trimming it where I need to, where it gets just too sticky and won't go inside the punch. Just trying to create a little bit more weight with some of the colors I have here, just working my way towards the center. I definitely feel like I need more yellow here, so I'm going to be conscious of punching that out. And because I want to make that nice big grouping of red leaves at the bottom, I punched a lot of extra there as well. So it does take me a little bit of time, as you probably have noticed, to unback some of these leaves. So I am putting them in, but I know this part of it does take a little while. Not easy if you don't have good dexterity with your fingers. That's another thing to be mindful of, especially if you're older. These leaves are really tiny and delicate, but I think you could accomplish something very similar with a larger punch. If you can find a larger leaf, you could just do fewer and have an easier time to unback them if you wanted to use the same technique. I think that would still look just as good. The smaller leaves were just because that's the punch I got and it was on clearance, so I was like, well, I think I could put some use to that this season, and picked it up. I think it was honestly $3, so definitely worth it for my craft stash. Just playing around here with the arrangement, trying to find a good balance with the focus bubble. We're going to call it a focus bubble there on the spread. And just kind of reworking some of the associations between the leaves, just giving some space around some of them, and also maybe making sure that the colors work in the right spots, kind of steering around the holes in the spine so I don't have to trim anything. Just, working it, but still trying to create that curvature I mentioned before so it looks a little bit more sweeping and more natural. So I feel like I need a few more still, especially in, I think, the yellow and orange tones. So I'll punch a little bit more. I have some of these leaves where there's like white areas where the watercolor didn't, spread into, and I really liked that added bit of texture. I could have done only full saturation leaves only, so the ones that were all green, but I really liked that little bit of, I don't know, watercolor roughness on some of them with the white splotches or the overlaid color with, like the hard lines. I really liked that as a texture for the spread. The leaves themselves create texture because they have so many edges and, there's a lot of detail in them, but just that little added bit of watercolor was something I was working for when I made it, so I really wanted to show that off in the leaves as well. And I thought about having like 1 or 2 leaves kind of just off on its own, going rogue, But I ended up kind of pulling it in. I think that could still be really nice. I was just a little bit worried about functionality at this point, trying to make sure I still had space for all of those checklists and, to-dos I really need to put on the spread to keep it functional. So I did kind of rein that in a little bit, but I still think that would be a nice idea. I also have punched out some circle label options here that I thought I might layer with just some plain white label paper and kind of create some other focus boxes or focus bubbles that way. But I didn't really like the crescent shape that would create with the white overlay. I'm not sure now what I want to do, if I want to back up the ones that I did pull with the borders on it, or what I want to do at this point. So we're just going to hold for now on those circles I just punched, and we will get things down on the page and then figure it out from there. Now, because these leaves are really not grouped together in a sense where there's not a lot of them actually touching each other, it does make that method of kind of sweeping things off of the wax paper tricky, but it doesn't stop me from trying. So I do give an attempt at trying to pick up and like smooth off the leaves all in one cluster. Works a little bit better in this corner because there is more grouped together, but as I go through the spread, you'll see it really it's more time consuming to try to do it this way than it is to just pick up the leaves and put them down individually. So what I decided to do was just to kind of eyeball it, like keep checking about where I had it and then lay them down. But first I'm going to move those letters just in case, you know, I don't want those to come off by chance and get stuck there on the page when I don't want them to. So like I said here, I'm just going to kind of try to eyeball it and move them over individually. I think that's just going to be the easiest way because they really aren't sliding off like I really want them to. I am trying to keep the positioning pretty similar. Of course, things move around, but there's a few things I was really trying to be conscious of, specifically this crossing section here over the spine. I really didn't want to have anything overlap the holes because I didn't want to have to do any trimming over the holes. So I have that, and then I'm just kind of filling in the gaps where I saw that it was needed. And so I'm just going to keep doing the same technique of just kind of matching up the wax paper and then moving things over one by one. And I got to this point here and I realized it would be easier for me to do it upside down so that I could move it on the right so I didn't have to move the wax paper so much. If that makes sense. There was a lot less wax paper to move with it on the right hand side for me since I'm right-handed. So I just did that so that I could easily shift over those leaves and transfer them where they needed to be. And okay, I'm really loving this, you guys. And honestly, I think this alone could be a spread, but you guys know me. If you follow my channel, I always like a little bit more. Sometimes simple spreads are good, and I think that this could have been just perfect as a simple spread, but as you'll see, I'm going to get into a little bit more of the color, and I really wanted to work in some of those washi tapes that I pulled, so we'll get to that here in a second. But first I'm going to go ahead and trim off all of the excess leaves, and then I will save the bigger chunks, of course, and try to reuse those if I can find a place for them. Because they are color dependent, some of them, you know, have to stay where they came from in that area. So like the red is easy to reincorporate for the most part, but I don't want to overdo it either in this area. So I'm trying to limit myself from going crazy. And I did go on a wild goose chase for my hole punch because what I thought I might do is use my hole punch like for a standard single hole punch and use those as bullets for my checklist. I went all over the house thinking I had it in my craft stash and blah blah blah, and lo and behold, it was on my desk the whole time. Of course it was. So I grabbed it and I tried it out and realized no, I don't want to do that. I might do it later. I did save the watercolor extra piece that I had there to use, but I just was a little bit fatigued and I didn't really like how it had punched through an area of that watercolor label sheet because it kind of created a soft, ragged edge on the hole punch. But maybe once it sets up a little bit longer and dries, then I'll come back and add those circles. So if you do follow me on Instagram, do check my after the pens. There might be some changes to this spread at that point, but for now, we're just going to kind of keep it simple in that area and figure out what we'll do for the checklist a little bit later. I'm trying to put in the washi tape now, and I tried it in like little clusters there on the spread, but I didn't like how it was detracting from the leaves. So what I decided on was just a nice little overlapping of the washi tape that I had in the green and the yellow, and then I brought in the pink to marry up on the opposite side with the orange, and it kind of works well with the colors that I already have on the spread. Just kind of reiterate that color scheme of, you know, gradiated color. So I'm putting that in now. I'm just going to put a little bit at the top and at the bottom. Again, just more emphasis of that color. And then I'm layering in a little bit of washi tape of texture on top of it. Very subtle, but you see it when you're nice and close to it. And again, this would have been fine without the added circles that I'm going to add here, but I just kind of liked the look of those circles that I punched with the watercolor. Kind of reminded me of like a harvest moon, and so I wanted to incorporate them somehow. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay them in, and you know, maybe use them as focus boxes right on top of them, or I don't know, maybe as decor. We'll see. There was, you know, areas at the top and the bottom that were a little bit sparse on decor, so I thought adding those in kind of helped bring everything together. And we're gonna call it, you guys. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below. Go ahead and leave me a comment if you'd like to get in touch, and think about subscribing to my channel if you'd like to see more of my videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Bye.